My husband, Arthur, sat beside me, his hand trembling slightly on the arm of his wheelchair. He hadn't spoken much today. The Parkinson's made it difficult, but his eyes were clear, fixed on the door. We were both waiting. Our son, Michael, had promised. He'd said, "We'll make a fuss, Mom. 70 is a big one." We. He always said we now. It never meant him and me. It meant him and her. Jessica, the clock on the wall, a bland plastic thing, ticked past 3 or 4 p.m. The scheduled time. The activities. Director, a relentlessly cheerful woman named Brenda, kept glancing at the entrance, her smile becoming strained. "Before we get into this, hit subscribe." "I'm sure they're just stuck in traffic," she said for the 3rd time. Arthur's hand tightened on the wheelchair. He knew. I think I did too. Then the electric doors at the end of the hall hissed open. It was Michael, alone. He walked towards us, his steps measured, his face a carefully neutral mask. He wasn't carrying a gift. He wasn't carrying anything. "Michael," I said, my voice sounding thin in the quiet room. "Mom, Dad." He nodded at Arthur, who just stared back. "Sorry I'm late." "Where's Jessica? And the kids?" I asked, my heart starting a slow, heavy thud in my chest. "They're in the car. I need to talk to you both. In private." Brenda, picking up on the tension, quickly shooed the other residents away. "All right, everyone. Show's over. Let's get you back to your programs." The room emptied, leaving the 3 of us with the vanilla cake and the single still-burning candle. Michael didn't sit. He stood over us, a businessman delivering bad news to a failing subsidiary. "Look," he began, shoving his hands in his pockets. "This isn't easy." "Just say it, son," Arthur grunted, the words an effort. "The truth is, we can't do this anymore. The visits, the calls, the burden. Jessica and I. We have our own lives, our own family to think about. The kids have activities. Our jobs are demanding. It's just too much." The words hung in the air, ugly and final. The burden. I thought of the conversation I'd overheard 4 days ago. I'd been on the phone with Michael when Jessica's voice, sharp and clear, had cut in from his end. "I can't take it anymore, Mike. It's every week with them. The complaining, the neediness. My mother would never do this to us. They're a black hole of time and money. You need to end it." I had pretended I heard nothing. I thought if I just loved him a little more, was a little less needy, it would pass. I was wrong. "This is her," I said, my voice flat, no question in it. "This is Jessica's idea." Michael's mask slipped, a flash of guilt, then defensiveness. "It's our decision, Mom. A mutual decision. You don't understand the pressure we're under. This place is expensive. The medical bills. It's draining us." He was talking about money, but it wasn't about money. It was about inconvenience. We had become an inconvenient truth. Arthur made a low guttural sound. He was trying to speak, to protest, but the disease had stolen his words. A single tear traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. Michael saw it and looked away, disgusted, or maybe ashamed. "The paperwork is already handled. I've spoken with the administration. Your assets will be signed over to cover the long-term care costs here. This is goodbye." He turned to leave. "Michael," I said. He stopped but didn't turn around. "It's my birthday." He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he walked out. The electric doors hissed shut behind him. I looked at Arthur. The tremor in his hand was violent now. The candle on the cake sputtered and went out, a thin curl of grey smoke rising into the air. The room was silent. We were alone. The burden had been officially returned to sender. My only mistake was growing old, and his was thinking that was a problem he could just walk away from. The days after Michael's visit bled into one another, a grey monotony broken only by the scheduled routines of the home. Meal times, medication, the occasional bingo game that Arthur and I now refused to attend. The humiliation was a physical presence, a third occupant in our small room. We were pariahs, the ones whose son had publicly discarded them. Arthur retreated into a stubborn silence. He would stare out the window for hours, his good hand clenched into a fist. The staff treated us with a careful, pitying politeness that was worse than anger. I, however, didn't sink. I hardened. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal. It was a financial one. Michael had mentioned assets. Our assets. The house we'd spent 40 years paying off. The small but comfortable retirement savings. The life insurance policies. I requested a meeting with the facility's director, a Mr. Henderson. He was a bland man in a cheap suit, his office smelling of stale coffee and resignation. Mrs. Jenkins, I assure you the transition has been handled with your best interests in mind, he said, avoiding my eyes. I want to see the paperwork my son signed, I demanded. I'm afraid that's a private matter between Mr. Jenkins and the... I am still of sound mind, Mr. Henderson. I cut him off, my voice sharp. I have not been declared incompetent. I have a right to see any document that relinquishes control of my property. He sighed, seeing a fight he didn't want. Reluctantly, he pulled a thin file from a cabinet. It was a power of attorney document, signed by Michael, and a contract with Sunset Gardens, committing the proceeds from the sale of our house to prepay our care for the next 5 years. After that, the state would take over. We would become wards of the system. The signature was Michael's. But the language, the cold, clinical efficiency of it, that was Jessica. She was an accountant. She understood the levers of power. I went back to our room. Arthur was still at the window. He sold the house, Arthur, I said, my voice quiet but clear. He's liquidating everything. Arthur didn't turn, but his shoulders stiffened. He understood. I had to know the full extent of the damage. I needed internet access. The communal computer in the library was slow and monitored. I needed my own. I used the room's phone, my one lifeline. I didn't call a friend. I called a lawyer. Not a family lawyer. A shark. A man named Robert Vance, whose ad promised aggressive advocacy for the elderly and exploited. He came to the home the next day. He was in his 50s with a sharp suit and even sharper eyes. He didn't offer pity. He offered a strategy. "Tell me everything," he said, placing a digital recorder on the table between us. I told him. About the overheard phone call. About the birthday. About the paperwork. About Jessica. When I finished, he nodded. "We can fight the power of attorney. We can argue undue influence, lack of capacity at the time of signing. It's a messy, expensive court battle. But there might be another way." "What way?" I asked. "Leverage," he said simply. "Does your son have secrets? Does his wife? People who do things like this. They usually have a closet full of skeletons. We find one, we use it to force them to reverse the financial transactions. Quietly. It was dirty. It was ruthless. It was perfect. I agreed. I gave him a retainer, paid for from the small secret cache of cash I kept in my Bible. A habit from a leaner time that Arthur had never known about. It was enough to get him started. While Vance dug, I worked on my own project. I started a journal. But it wasn't a diary of feelings. It was a ledger. A cold, factual accounting of every sacrifice we had made for Michael. The college fund we drained to pay for his wedding. The down payment we gave him for his first house. The countless hours of free babysitting. I listed it all, with dates and amounts where possible. I was building a case, not for a court of law, but for the court of my own conscience. I was proving to myself that we had not been a burden. We had been an investment, and he had defaulted. Weeks turned into a month. Then, Vance called. His voice was crisp with satisfaction. "Mrs. Jenkins." I found it. It's not a skeleton. It's a ticking time bomb. He came over and laid it out. His investigator had followed Jessica. She wasn't just an accountant. She was a creative one. She had been siphoning money from her own firm, a mid-sized marketing agency, for years. Small, clever amounts, disguised as vendor payments. She had amassed over $200,000 in a hidden account. And, Vance said, leaning forward, "My guy got photos. She meets with the vendor, a shell company she controls, once a month, for a business lunch. The vendor is represented by a man. The same man, every time. There. Very familiar with each other." He slid a grainy photograph across the table. It showed Jessica, laughing, leaning across a restaurant table to feed a strawberry to a handsome younger man. It was not Michael. I looked at the photo. I felt no anger towards Jessica. She was a snake. We had known that. But this was the lever. "My son," I said, my voice cold. "Does he know?" "Absolutely not," Vance said. "He's completely in the dark about the embezzlement and the affair." I stared at the photograph. My daughter-in-law, a thief and an adulteress, had convinced my son to abandon his parents. She had judged us a burden while she was secretly looting her own company and betraying her husband. A plan began to form in my mind. A simple, brutal, and perfect plan. Vance wanted to use this to force a financial settlement. I had a different idea. I was no longer just a wronged mother. I was a creditor. And it was time to call in the debt. My only mistake was growing old. But my mind was sharper than ever. And I was just getting started. I instructed Robert Vance to prepare 2 packages. The first contained the evidence of Jessica's embezzlement. Bank statements, transaction records, the works. It was addressed to the senior partners at her firm. The second contained the photos of her and the younger man, along with a note simply stating, "Ask your wife about Vendor Solutions, Inc., and her lunch dates." This one was addressed to Michael at his office. I did not send them, not yet. They were my weapons, but I was not ready to fire. I wanted a face-to-face reckoning. I had Vance call Michael. He was to tell him that I was gravely ill and was asking for him, that it was urgent. It was a lie, but a necessary one. He would never come otherwise. 2 days later, Michael rushed into our room at Sunset Gardens. He looked genuinely concerned, and for a fleeting second I saw the ghost of the boy I'd raised. Then his eyes darted around the room, saw Arthur sitting calmly by the window, and me standing firmly by the bed, and the concern was replaced by confusion, and then irritation. "You're not sick," he accused. "Sit down, Michael," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. He remained standing. "I'm a very busy man, Mom. What is this about?" "It's about the burden," I said. "My burden. And yours." I picked up the 2 thick envelopes from my bedside table. I held them up. "In this one," I said, tapping the first, "is enough evidence to send your wife to prison for embezzlement for a very, very long time. Over $200,000 taken from her company." Michael's face went slack with disbelief. "What, that's insane. Jessica would never—" I cut him off by tapping the second envelope. "And in this one are photographs. Photographs of your wife and her business associate. They're quite intimate. He's much younger. I believe you know him. He came to your barbecue last summer." The color drained from Michael's face. He stumbled back a step, bracing himself against the wall. "You're lying. I have no reason to lie. You, on the other hand, are living a lie." I placed the envelopes back on the table. "She convinced you to throw away your parents, Michael. To sell our home, to steal our security. All while she was stealing from her job and cheating on you. She didn't want us to be a burden on your life, because we were taking resources away from her secret one." He slid down the wall onto the floor, his head in his hands. He looked broken. "No, no." Arthur from his wheelchair made a sound. A low, satisfied grunt. He understood. I felt no pleasure in this, only a cold, surgical satisfaction. "Here is what is going to happen," I said, my voice calm and precise. "You are going to go to the administration of this home, and you are going to rescind the power of attorney. You are going to reverse the sale of our house and return every penny of our assets to our control. You will do this by the end of the week." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear. "I can't. The paperwork, the money. You will find a way," I said. "If you do not, I will mail both of these envelopes. Jessica will go to jail, and you will be left with nothing but divorce papers and public humiliation. Your choice." The weight of his own ruined life was finally, truly, on his shoulders. The burden was his. He left without another word. A broken man. He worked fast. The power of self-preservation is a remarkable motivator. Within 72 hours, Mr. Henderson was in our room, stammering and apologetic, with a new stack of paperwork nullifying the previous agreements. The sale of our house was miraculously unfinalized. Our accounts were being restored. We were free. We had our lives back. A week later, I was watching the local news on the small television in our room. A brief segment came on. "Local woman arrested in major embezzlement scheme." Jessica's corporate headshot flashed on the screen, her face a mask of shock. The report said the firm had uncovered the fraud during an internal audit. There was no mention of an anonymous tip. I had never sent the envelope. I hadn't needed to. The truth, once set in motion, has a way of revealing itself. Perhaps her firm had gotten suspicious. Perhaps her lover had talked. It didn't matter. Michael never called to tell us. I heard through a former neighbor that he had filed for divorce. The burden was gone, but the silence it left behind was profound. We did not return to our old house. The memories there were now tainted, the walls echoing with the ghost of Michael's betrayal. We used the restored funds to move into a much nicer assisted living facility, one with views of a garden and staff who didn't know our history. We had a 2-bedroom suite. We had peace, Arthur's health, freed from the weight of despair, stabilized. He started physical therapy again. He still couldn't speak much, but the light returned to his eyes. We would sit for hours in the garden not talking, just watching the birds, our hands linked. The love between us, forged over 50 years, was the one thing our son had not been able to take. I transferred a substantial portion of our remaining money into a new trust. The terms were very specific. It was to be used to fund a legal advocacy program for the elderly, specifically those facing financial exploitation by family members. I named it the Arthur Jenkins Shield. Robert Vance agreed to sit on the board. I thought that was the end of it. I had protected my husband, secured our future, and ensured some good would come from our pain. I was wrong. One afternoon, about 6 months after we'd moved, a nurse told me I had a visitor. My heart clenched. It couldn't be Michael, could it? I walked into the visitor's lounge. It wasn't Michael. It was my grandson, Liam. He was 16, all awkward limbs and a face that was a heartbreaking copy of Michael's at that age. He was holding a small gift-wrap box. "Grandma," he said, his voice cracking. "Liam." I remained standing. "What are you doing here?" He shuffled his feet. I took the bus. Mom's, well, you know. And Dad, he's not really around much anymore. I said nothing. I heard things. Liam continued, his words tumbling out in a rush. After Mom got arrested, Dad was yelling a lot. He said you had proof, that you blackmailed him. He looked at me, his eyes full of a confusion that was too old for his face. Did you? Did you send Mom to jail? I looked at my grandson. He was a casualty in this war he never asked to join. No, Liam, I said. And it was the truth. I did not. Your mother sent herself to jail with her own choices, and your father made his. I saw the relief in his eyes. He needed a villain, but he didn't want it to be me. Why are you here? I asked again, more gently. He held out the gift. It's for your birthday. The one we missed. I took the box. I opened it. Inside was a simple, beautiful porcelain dove. It's for peace, he whispered. I looked from the dove to my grandson's hopeful, wounded face. He was trying to bridge a chasm his parents had blown open. Thank you, Liam, I said. It's lovely. We talked for a little while. He told me about school, about his soccer team. It was stilted, awkward, but it was a start. When he left, he promised to visit again. I placed the porcelain dove on the windowsill in our new suite, where the morning sun would catch it. It was a complicated symbol, not of forgiveness, which I could not grant, but of a fragile future possibility. My son left me and my husband in a nursing home on my birthday. He thought he was discarding a burden, but he was wrong. A burden is a weight you carry unwillingly. What we were was a foundation, the foundation of his life, his values, his very existence. And when you tear out your own foundation, the entire structure is destined to collapse. He is living in the rubble now, and we, the foundation he thought was crumbling, are the ones who were moved to safer, firmer ground. My only mistake was growing old, and his was believing that made me weak.